They thought she was just the grease-stained girl in the corner. They saw oil under her fingernails, a torn Carhartt jacket, and a name tag that read A. Monroe, and they laughed. But they weren't laughing for long. It started on a damp October morning in Harlan Ridge, Kentucky, the kind of small town where everyone knows your business and assumes they know your worth. I'm Avery Monroe, 38, and I've run Monroe Auto and Diesel for the past 7 years. It's not glamorous, it's not big, but it's honest, and it's mine. That morning, a sleek black Mustang GT 2023 pulled into the lot, tires hissing on wet pavement. The driver stepped out like he was arriving at a press conference, boots polished, military haircut sharp, a Rolex glinting under his sleeve. He didn't smile. "I'm looking for the owner," he said, scanning the garage like he expected someone taller, stronger, male. "You're looking at her," I said, wiping my hands on a rag and tossing it onto the bench. He paused, blinked slowly, then gave me a once-over like I was part of the problem. "You're the mechanic." I nodded. "And the boss?" He scoffed, not with sound, but with posture. "Colonel Nathaniel Brooks," he said, offering a hand that was too firm, too deliberate. "I'm overseeing logistics and vehicle procurement for Fort Burton." I shook it, meeting his gaze. "Avery Monroe." His eyes drifted past me. "Is there someone else I should be speaking to?" "Nope." He sighed, unlocking the Mustang's door. "The steering's off. Noises from the front end. I have a meeting with the base commander tomorrow morning. I need it fixed by then." I told him our usual turnaround was 2-3 days. We don't cut corners. He didn't like that. "I don't think you understand," he said, stepping closer. "I have influence over who gets what contracts on base. Your little shop could benefit." It wasn't a threat, not exactly, but it wasn't subtle either. "I understand just fine," I replied calmly, "and I don't compromise safety for speed. Let me check it out first." He watched me like a hawk while I worked phone calls, deep sighs, checking his watch every 5 minutes. I diagnosed a failing power steering pump and damage to the front suspension. It wasn't just wear and tear. Whoever had driven this beast had pushed it too hard. "I'll need to order parts," I explained. 2 days minimum." He folded his arms. "Not acceptable. I want this prioritized." "I don't jump the line, Colonel. That's not how I run my shop." His smile returned this time, tight and cold. "Other shops would take this opportunity." "Then perhaps you should take it to them." His jaw clenched, but he left not before telling my assistant, "Ray, if your boss knew how to play the game, she'd be somewhere bigger than this dump." Ray looked at me like I should chase after him. I didn't. "You sure we shouldn't just fast-track it, Av?" Ray asked when Brooks was gone. "We could use the money." "We'll use our reputation," I said, heading back to the lift. "We've made it this far without crawling." 2 days later, the Mustang was purring like new. I charged him fairly $1,850 for parts and labor, with a 10% military discount already applied. When Colonel Brooks returned, he didn't greet me. He just demanded to see the invoice. "This is robbery," he said loudly, making sure the other customers could hear. "You're charging 200% markup on parts. You think I don't know what these cost?" I stayed calm, showing him the breakdown. Real-time parts invoices, hourly labor, lower than standard markup. He wasn't interested. "I'm paying $1,200, he declared. "That's more than generous." I refused. He narrowed his eyes and pulled out his phone. "You just turned down a base contract worth $80,000 a year. I was going to recommend your shop. Now I'll have to file a report. Price gouging. Low service standards." I didn't flinch. "Then file it," I said. "But I'll still sleep tonight." He slammed his card on the counter, paid the discounted total barely, and left in silence. But the storm hadn't passed. It had just begun. I thought that would be the end of it. He'd throw a tantrum, blow off steam, and move on. But Colonel Nathaniel Brooks wasn't the kind of man who moved on. He was the kind that moved against. 3 days later, I got an email from Fort Burton's procurement office. A formal notice. Monroe Auto and Diesel had been disqualified from consideration for all base contracts. The reason? Concerns regarding pricing, ethics, and service integrity. The email was CC'd to Colonel Brooks. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. My hands clenched the arms of the chair, not with fear but with clarity. Ray came in carrying lunch, paused when he saw my face. "Bad news?" I turned the screen toward him. "No way," he whispered. "He's really trying to take us out." He wasn't just trying, he was succeeding. By the end of the week, 5 customers cancelled appointments. One of them, a military spouse, said quietly, "Sorry. My husband was told your work might void our base insurance. Something about safety violations. I didn't argue. What could I say? By December, our monthly revenue had dropped by nearly 30%. Ray's hours were reduced. I had to let our weekend apprentice go. The expansion loan loomed over me like a storm cloud I couldn't outrun. Then came Laura. She was the wife of a deployed sergeant and a regular customer. She brought in their minivan, clearly stressed. "Transmission's shot," she said. "We don't have a choice." I gave her the full military family discount, threw in a payment plan. She cried when she picked it up. 2 days later, she called back, this time in tears, for a different reason. "Avery, I'm so sorry. Colonel Brooks found out we brought the van to you. He pulled my husband aside on video call and said the work you do is substandard reckless. Even James is scared he'll get flagged just for letting me go to your shop." I felt my chest cave in, not because of lost business, but because he was weaponizing fear. That night, I stayed late in the office, the sound of ticking tools long gone. The garage was silent, just me and a decision. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't draft an apology. I opened my computer and I started gathering receipts. I pulled every invoice related to Brooks's car, parts ordered, shipping slips, internal labor logs, timestamps. Then I opened the footage from our security system and clipped a full 7 minutes of his behavior: arrogant, impatient, dismissive. I made a full report showing our pricing compared with 3 other local garages. We were under the median in all categories. I needed backup, so I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Captain Linda Reyes, retired Army logistics officer and former mentor. She picked up after 1 ring. "Monroe," she said, "you still spinning wrenches in Kentucky?" I told her everything. There was silence on the line. Then, "This isn't just petty payback, Avery. If he's steering contracts away from your business and toward one of his choosing based on personal grudges, that's abuse of power, possibly procurement fraud. Can I prove it?" "I'll help you." She had contacts in the Army Inspector General's office. By the end of the week, I had a name: Captain Teresa Washington. She requested I submit a full complaint with documentation. As I gathered the last pieces, I noticed something odd in one of the bid rejection files. The shop that did win the Fort Burton maintenance contract, Falcon Precision Auto Care. That name rang a bell. Quick background search. And there it was. Registered owner Robert Brooks, Colonel Brooks's brother. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so blatant. They thought I'd roll over. Instead, I printed everything, backed it up 3 times, and emailed a 14-page formal complaint with full attachments to the Inspector General's office. Meanwhile, I didn't stay quiet. I drafted a new transparency policy for Monroe, Auto, and Diesel. Every invoice now included raw parts, costs, markup percentages, and comparisons to national averages. We posted it online, in the garage, and included it in every customer interaction. No hiding, no guessing, just truth. I emailed it to every military family we'd ever served, along with a note: "If you've been satisfied with our work, your honest review means more than ever right now. I didn't ask for favors. I asked for fairness." Within 72 hours, 5 glowing reviews went live. One came from Laura's husband, Sergeant James Miller, writing from deployment. "My CO has no business telling my family where to get our vehicle fixed. Avery Monroe runs the most honest garage I've ever worked with. If this is the hill, I'll stand on it." And then, something unexpected. Mike Daniels, an Army medic who'd been coming to my shop for years, walked in with a thick manila envelope. "I thought you might want to see this," he said. It was a record of past invoices from Falcon Precision Auto, the company run by Brooks's brother. Over 18 months, they'd charged Fort Burton nearly double what I had proposed in my bid. Double, for basic oil changes, for tire rotations, for air filters. Now it wasn't just shady. It was corruption. And for the first time in months, I wasn't tired. I wasn't scared. I was ready. 2 weeks after I submitted my complaint, I got the call. "Avery Monroe?" the voice said. "This is Captain Teresa Washington, Army Inspector General's office. We're investigating your report regarding Colonel Nathaniel Brooks. Would you be available to come to Fort Burton headquarters tomorrow morning?" "Yes, ma'am," I said without hesitation. I didn't sleep much that night. My hands wouldn't stop moving folding laundry I didn't need, organizing bolts by thread size. The idea of walking into a military base to testify against a colonel felt like jumping into a wildfire holding a gas can. But the next morning, I walked through those gates with my head high and a folder in my hand neatly tabbed with every piece of documentation I had. Inside a conference room lined with flags, Captain Washington sat beside a tall, unreadable man introduced as Major Christopher Daniels. I was asked to walk them through everything: the encounter with Colonel Brooks, the Mustang repair, the threats, the online sabotage, and finally, the discovery of his brother's company holding base contracts at inflated rates. They didn't interrupt, just took notes. "We've already spoken with several of the families mentioned in your report," Captain Washington said when I finished. "Their statements align with yours. We're reviewing the payment history from Falcon Precision Auto Care as we speak." I exhaled slowly, then nodded. 2 days later, I was tightening bolts on an old F-150 when the garage door flew open with a bang. Colonel Brooks stormed inside, his face flushed red, jaw clenched like a vice. "You filed a complaint against me?" he thundered, loud enough for every customer and employee to hear. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ray instinctively moved behind the counter and hit the record button on our shop's audio-video system. I put my wrench down slowly. "I filed a truthful report about your conduct, Colonel, that's all." "You're playing with fire," he hissed, leaning over the counter. "I have connections in places you can't imagine. Your little garage? It won't last the month." "Is that a threat, sir?" I said calmly, my voice deliberately clear for the recording. He paused, realizing he'd overplayed his hand, straightened his coat. "It's a prediction," he said coldly. "Good luck surviving." He walked out. Doors slammed behind him. That evening, an email pinged into my inbox. Subject line, "Urgent follow, up, IG office." Inside was a short message from Captain Washington. "Thank you for your cooperation. We've received additional evidence, including today's recording. Colonel Brooks's brother's company has been suspended from all military contracts pending formal investigation. Please be available for a high-level meeting next week." And then came the day everything changed. I was summoned to a formal procurement review meeting at Fort Burton. It wasn't a back-office session. This was the room where decisions were made. When I entered, I nearly froze. At the head of the table sat Brigadier General Thomas Hayes. Beside him were Captain Washington, Major Daniels, 2 civilian auditors from the Army Audit Agency, and on the far side, seated stiffly in a crisp uniform, Colonel Brooks, flanked by a military attorney. The general gestured for me to sit. "Miss Monroe," he began, "thank you for coming, and thank you for standing firm. Following a thorough investigation, we have uncovered multiple procurement violations." He continued reading from a report. "Colonel Brooks deliberately diverted contracts to Falcon Precision Auto Care owned by his brother despite their rates exceeding federal guidelines. He used his authority to discredit your business after you refused to give him preferential service. This pattern of behavior mirrors a prior incident at Fort Jefferson, where similar complaints were suppressed." Colonel Brooks's face was pale, his jaw locked shut. His attorney tried to interrupt, but General Hayes raised his hand. "The evidence is clear, Counselor. The video from Monroe Auto, the pricing analysis, the whistleblower statements, and now documentation from Sergeant James Miller confirming undue pressure on military families. This is not a misunderstanding. This is abuse." And then came the moment that stilled the room. General Hayes turned to me and slid a folder across the table. "This is a revised request for proposal for our base maintenance contracts. It's been split into 3 parts to support small businesses. We'd be honored if you submitted a bid." Colonel Brooks stood suddenly. "This is absurd. She's one mechanic in a backwater shop. She can't handle this volume." The room fell silent. The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sit down, Colonel," he said. "Your judgment is no longer welcome in this matter." The colonel's eyes darted around the room for support, but found none. He slowly sat back down. General Hayes continued, "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your procurement duties. Administrative and criminal proceedings are pending. You may consider yourself under formal review." I sat still, barely breathing, not with fear this time, with something deeper, vindication. That night, back at the shop, we celebrated with cheeseburgers and milkshakes in the back office. Ray toasted with his wrench. Laura's husband, James, called in from overseas just to say, "You did it." The shop didn't just survive. It became a symbol. A week later, civilians started pouring in. Locals who said, "Heard what you did at the base," or "We want honest work. You've got it here." Online reviews surged. My loan? Paid off 6 months ahead of schedule. I hired 2 more mechanics and gave everyone raises. I didn't say much. But one day, a young woman walked into the shop, probably 22, new Army recruit, eyes full of questions. She looked around, wide-eyed. Are you really the mechanic who stood up to a colonel? I smiled and handed her a clean oil change invoice, marked with our full cost breakdown. No, I said. I'm just someone who won't be bullied. But word was out. And the army? They had just started listening. 6 months after the hearing at Fort Burton, I was invited to speak at a small business ethics seminar hosted by the Department of Defense. It was held in a simple auditorium on base-folding chairs, white walls, a podium that squeaked when you touched it. I stood in front of a room full of contractors, officers, and young entrepreneurs. My voice wasn't polished, my PowerPoint slides weren't fancy, but every head stayed turned toward me. I told them the truth about how power can be subtle, how corruption doesn't always come in bribes but in favors, whispers, threats, and how integrity doesn't have to roar, it just has to refuse to move. When I finished, there was a long pause, then applause, quiet at first, then stronger. As I stepped down from the podium, Brigadier General Hayes approached. He didn't say much, he rarely did, but he handed me a small certificate. Miss Monroe, he said, we've renamed the base maintenance facility. It's now called the Integrity Center, not officially after you, but let's not kid ourselves. I blinked back something in my throat I hadn't expected. It wasn't pride. It was peace. A few weeks later, a man walked into the shop just before closing. Clean suit, tired eyes. He introduced himself. Robert Brooks. I'm Nathaniel's brother. I didn't say a word. He took a deep breath. I came to apologize, he said. When Nathaniel told me I'd get guaranteed contracts if I opened a branch near Fort Burton, I didn't ask too many questions. He handled the pricing. I signed the papers. I knew it wasn't right, but I told myself it was just how the system worked. You overcharged the army by over $100,000, I said quietly. He nodded. I'm shutting the company down, and I'm paying back every cent. There wasn't much more to say, but before he left, he paused at the door. You didn't just stop my brother, you stopped me too. Thank you. After he left, Ray looked at me from across the bay. Think he meant it? Doesn't matter, I said, returning to the invoice I was reviewing. We're still here. Monroe, Auto, and Diesel kept growing, but not into some flashy mega chain. We stayed local, stayed personal. The garage got a fresh coat of paint. Ray eventually became co-manager. We hired Laura to help at the front desk. When her husband James came back from deployment, I offered him a position as our new fleet service specialist. He said yes, without hesitation. And the military contract? We handled it. Efficiently, honestly, with complete transparency. A few journalists reached out. One wanted to do a feature on the mechanic who took down a colonel. I declined. This wasn't about fame, it was about standards. One spring afternoon, I was showing a new recruit how to recalibrate a suspension system when she asked, "How did you stay calm through all of that?" I paused, wiped my hands on a cloth, and said, "Because I knew I was right. That's more powerful than anything they can throw at you." She smiled, nodded, kept working. Not long after, I received a handwritten letter, no return address, no signature, but the handwriting was familiar. You weren't supposed to win, but I'm glad you did. You were the one thing I couldn't control, and that's exactly why you succeeded. I read it once, then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. Some battles are over long before anyone admits defeat, but the legacy? That stays. Every so often, someone will walk into the shop someone new, someone hesitant, and say, "Is this the place from that story?" I just smile. "Depends which story you heard," I say. And I get back to work. Asterisk greatness doesn't dress to impress. It walks quietly covered in grease and grittened, lets the truth do the talking. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Asterisk